So this case, the Joshlin Smith case, it really is, well, it's unsettling. It's that kind of story that just grabs you. Imagine, right, the terror of a child going missing, every parent's worst nightmare. Absolutely. A missing child is always a tragedy. But, and here's where it gets even darker, the mother's behavior starts raising all these red flags. You start to question everything. Right. Those details, the way people react in these situations, they can be incredibly revealing. Joshlin Smith, a 6-year-old, vanished from her home in Saldanha Bay, South Africa, just gone. And we're left with so many questions, few answers. It's a puzzle with so many missing pieces. Today, we're going to dive deep, really deep, into everything we know so far, trying to make sense of it all. We've been poring over court testimony, news reports, articles from IOL and Daily Maverick, really getting into the nitty-gritty. It's like piecing together a mosaic, trying to see the full picture. This case, it's gripped the whole nation. And we're here to help you, our listeners, unpack all of it, the complex details, the conflicting information, all those twists and turns. Yeah, there's so many layers to this story. By the end, you'll have a much clearer understanding of what's at stake and why this case is so important. So, ready to dive in? Absolutely, let's get into it. Okay, let's start at the very beginning. It's February 19th, 2024. Joshlin disappears from her home, just like that, gone. Last seen wearing, and this detail is heartbreaking, a light blue t-shirt, denim shorts, and pink slippers. Her mother, Raquel Smith, everyone calls her Kelly, reports her missing. That initial report, it often sets the tone for the entire investigation. Now, Kelly's story, at least at first, is that she left Joshlin in the care of her boyfriend, Jacques Apollos. They call him Boeta. She went to work, assumed everything was fine. Okay, but already, even at this early stage, alarm bells start going off. What? Leaving a 6-year-old, a young child, with the boyfriend. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's not necessarily a red flag in every case, but it just adds this layer of complexity. Makes you wonder about the situation at home, the relationships. Definitely. So massive searches, everyone's looking for Joshlin, but nothing. She's vanished without a trace. Time passes, nearly a whole year, and then bam, huge development. And this is where the case takes that really dark turn. Kelly, the boyfriend, Apollos, and their friend Stephen No Van Ryn all arrested. The charges: kidnapping and human trafficking. Wow, yeah. The state alleges that Joshlin was, and this is a tough one to even say, sold, delivered, or exchanged. It's just horrifying. Think about it from the investigator's perspective. They start with a missing child, terrible, but sadly not uncommon. Then, almost a year later, boom, they're dealing with potential organized crime. Huge shift in the investigation. Right, the whole picture changes, and it points to something way more sinister than just a child wandering off. You start to think, could she have been exploited by the very people who should have been protecting her? Yeah, the implications are devastating. Fast forward to March 3rd, 2025. The trial begins. It's being held at the Saldanha Bay Multipurpose Center. They had to move it to a bigger venue because of the intense public interest. This case, it's really captured everyone's attention. High-profile case, lots of pressure. All 3 defendants, they plead not guilty. And Judge Nathan Erasmus, presiding over the case, he makes it very clear right from the start. If they're convicted of human trafficking, the minimum sentence, life imprisonment. The stakes are so high, everyone involved, the prosecution, the defense, even the public watching, all under immense pressure. And then there's Joshlin, this little girl who's at the heart of it all. Absolutely. Now, the first witness the prosecution calls is Constable Yanga Gongotha. He's the officer who took Kelly's initial report, helped search for Joshlin. Interesting choice, right. His testimony, it's not just about the facts, it's about Kelly's demeanor. And this is where things get really interesting. He describes her as oddly calm, unemotional, not how you'd expect a mother to react when her child is missing. Right, those small details, those observations, they can become crucial pieces of the puzzle. Trying to decipher what's genuine grief, what might be something else. Gongotha's testimony, it raises this big question that's going to hang over the entire trial. Was Kelly's lack of emotion real? Or was it something else, something calculated? And then there's this other detail that just sticks out. Kelly, right after reporting Joshlin missing, she asks Gongotha about something totally unrelated, a gas cylinder refill. That's odd, isn't it? In that moment, wouldn't you expect a mother to be laser focused on her missing child? It makes you wonder, what was going through her mind? Was it just shock, or was it a deliberate attempt to distract, maybe even create an alibi? It's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely a detail that raises more questions than answers. We're left wondering, was this just a random question? Or a carefully placed piece in a bigger puzzle? So we left off talking about Kelly Smith's behavior and those observations from Constable Gangappa. Remember, he thought she was oddly calm, maybe too calm for a mom whose child had vanished. Right, just didn't seem to add up. And then the prosecution, they bring up this other detail. It really makes you think. Initially, Kelly tells the police she only realized Joshlin was missing when she got home from work. But then later, in her written statement, she changes her story. Oh, this is interesting. Yeah, now she says she was actually searching for Joshlin with Apollos, the boyfriend, earlier that day. Well, that's a big difference. I mean, was she just confused about the timeline? It had been a while. Or was she trying to, I don't know, mislead the investigators? It makes you wonder, right? Did the police pressure her into changing her story? Or maybe later she realized her first account didn't make sense and tried to fix it. The defense is going to have to address this, for sure. They'll probably say it was just stress, the trauma of the situation. But for the prosecution, this could be a key piece of evidence. It feeds into their whole theory that Kelly was involved in Joshlin's disappearance. Makes sense. Now, what of the defense? Did they try to explain away Kelly's behavior, like the whole gas cylinder thing, not being emotional? During the cross-examination of Gangappa, Apollos' lawyer, Fanny Harmsay, he tackles this head on. He basically says, look, maybe Gangappa just misread the situation, interpreted things wrong. Okay, interesting. And then he goes even further, points out inconsistencies in Gangappa's statements. For example, Gangappa's affidavit claims Kelly was alone when she reported Joshlin missing. But in his testimony, he says there was another woman there. Oh, I see. Classic tactic, right? Trying to discredit the witness. Exactly. You plant that seed of doubt about the officer's credibility. Maybe the whole police investigation starts to look shaky. It makes you wonder if that's their whole strategy to kind of undermine the entire investigation. Could be. We'll have to see how they handle the rest of the evidence. But, and this is important, we also have the testimony of Constable Lizuko Kobe's, another responding officer. He backs up Gangappa's observations about Kelly being, well, strangely calm. So now you have two officers both saying the same thing, right? And Kobe also adds that Apollos seemed pressured, not very cooperative when they questioned him. Okay, so that adds another layer. Even if the defense tries to pick apart their individual statements, the fact that they both noticed similar things, that's got to mean something, right? Yeah, it's pretty compelling. And here's another twist. Remember, Apollos, he originally said he last saw Joshlin playing outside his shack. But then, get this, his own lawyer contradicts him. Says that wasn't true. Hold on, what? So Apollos' lawyer is admitting he lied to the police. It's a risky move, no doubt. But maybe they're trying to, I don't know, distance Apollos from Kelly, like he was forced to lie or manipulated. Or maybe they're setting us up for a completely different story later on. Who knows? It's a gamble, but it certainly adds another layer of intrigue to this whole thing. Definitely keeps things interesting. Now, what about the other guy, Stephen Van Rijn? What do we know about his involvement? So far, the focus has been on Kelly and Apollos. But don't forget, there's another player in all this, Laurentia Lombard. A friend of Kelly and Apollos, she turned state witness. Oh, right, I forgot about her. Her testimony, it's going to be crucial for sure. The prosecution's probably hoping she'll fill in some blanks, maybe shed some light on Van Rijn's role as well. Yeah, but the defense, I bet they're going to question her motives. I mean, she was initially implicated in Joshlin's disappearance too, right? Absolutely. They'll try to paint her as unreliable, maybe even suggest she's trying to save her own skin by pointing fingers at others. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, but even if her motives are questionable, her testimony could be the turning point in this whole trial, no doubt. What stands out to you so far? I mean, what's really grabbing your attention? For me, it's Kelly's behavior. It just seems so inconsistent. On the one hand, she's a mother whose child is missing. I mean, that's got to be devastating. But then you have these strange details, the lack of emotion, the changing stories, that weird focus on the gas cylinder. It's hard to make sense of it all. It really is. It's like, all right, we're trying to solve this puzzle, but the pieces don't quite fit. And at the center of it all, you have this really ambiguous figure, the mother. Was she a victim? Or did she orchestrate this whole thing? That question, it's the key to the entire case. And the answer will determine the fate of all three defendants. It's crazy, right? We spent all this time, these last two parts, really digging into this case, listening to all the testimony, trying to figure out who's telling the truth, and it just keeps getting more complicated. Exactly. Every detail seems to lead to more questions, but that's what makes this deep dive so important, so compelling. Definitely. We're not just following a trial, we're getting this inside look at this really dark side of society. We're talking about human trafficking, a crime that often happens in the shadows. Hard to even grasp sometimes. It really is. And if what the state is saying is true, if Joshlin was trafficked, especially by her own family, that's unimaginable, right? It is. It's just beyond comprehension. As a parent myself, to even think about a mother orchestrating the sale of her own child, it makes you question everything. It forces us to confront this really uncomfortable truth about human nature, about the capacity for greed and exploitation, even within families. You're right. And sadly, Joshlin's case, it really highlights this terrible reality. Children, particularly those in vulnerable communities, those facing poverty, social challenges, they become targets for traffickers. Absolutely. It's a systemic issue and it's heartbreaking. Thinking about Joshlin, a 6-year-old girl caught up in all of this, it's devastating. It really is. And it makes the outcome of this trial even more crucial. I was just thinking that. This case, it sets a precedent. Exactly. A conviction. It sends a strong message, not just to the traffickers, but to society as a whole. It shows that we take this crime seriously, that we're committed to protecting the most vulnerable among us. But even if there's a conviction, it won't bring Joshlin back. That's the tragedy that remains. No matter what happens in the courtroom, a little girl is gone and a family is shattered. It's a reminder that behind all the legal arguments, all the courtroom drama, there are real lives impacted, real pain endured. Joshlin's case, it's a wake-up call for all of us. It underscores the need to be vigilant, to be aware of the signs of trafficking, to speak out against any form of exploitation. It's easy to get caught up in the darkness of these stories, to feel overwhelmed, but I think it's important to remember there are people fighting back, people working tirelessly to combat human trafficking. Absolutely. There are organizations, law enforcement officials, everyday people, all dedicated to protecting children and holding perpetrators accountable. And that gives me hope, even in the face of such a tragic case. Me too. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the Joshlin Smith case, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away? Let's not let Joshlin's story fade away. Let's use it as a call to action, a reason to learn more about human trafficking, to become part of the solution. Yeah, what can people do? Even small actions, supporting a local charity, raising awareness in your community. These things can make a difference. Well said. We encourage everyone listening to stay informed about this case, see how it unfolds, and think about what you can do, even in a small way, to help protect children in your own communities. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.